on the formation of the proposed government of national unity. Let's welcome political analyst Dr. Ongama Mtimka on, of course, the anticipation of the cabinet announcement as well as the current state of the GNU. Doctor, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So the latest news in is that apparently talks are back on track. But should we trust in this process, I mean, after it started on such a bad footing? And what do you think are some of the outstanding issues that still need to be dealt with in this regard?
Good afternoon, Aisha. Thank you for having me. So first of all, I don't think that the process started on a bad footing. A bad footing would have been taking too long to arrive at a decision that says it's time to work together. We mustn't forget as South Africans that we've just had a historic election and two historic opponents have agreed to work together within 14 days to kind of, create a government collaboratively. So my sense is that what we saw this week was a reflection of how uneasy the process is, but also it was a reflection of the commitment that still remains among these two major players, particularly, to continue to talk together so that they craft a government. That it has taken them a huge shift from competitive electoral politics before the elections to suddenly finding ways to working together, yes, rubbing each other the wrong way throughout the process, but still remaining around the table is a big thing for our country.
And speaking of those two major players, Doctor, I'm glad that you mentioned that because one of the founding members of the GNU, right, which is the IFP, held a media briefing yesterday about its actual concerns about the current stalemate within the GNU formation and actually urged those two major players that you've referred to, namely the ANC as well as the DA, to line out their outstanding issues. So generally, what can this be translated to, Doctor, especially by one of those three founding members of the GNU who should basically have inside information of all the agreements that are currently taking place within the formation of the GNU?
I loved the temperament that the IFP has in the process. Remember, if you are a political player and there's emphasis on others and not yourself, the temptation would be to want to stamp your authority that you also matter. But beautifully, they've been able to assume a role that says, guys, get together. We're still here. We need the process to move forward. But I like the fact that the IFP gives space to both the ANC and the DA that they can have, this process as the two biggest parties, rather than them wanting to contest the space. They are coming and they are kindly nudging the process forward, as opposed to coming to contest why they are not the focal point of attention. That talks about people who can read the times and understand what their role is going to be. And I think it's no less, by the way, important. And I think that they have read the room exceptionally well and are playing it in ways that are not alienating to these two big, partners of theirs. They are simply nudging them to go forward. And I think that if they maintain this attitude, they may be the elder brother, if you like, in the coalition that actually helps to, because remember, these are not, elections are not, it's not the first time and the last time that we're going to have them. They will creep up during governance, and you're going to need an IFP that assumes this position so that it actually nudges everybody to work together. Call it leading from the bottom.
Very interesting term, Doctor, leading from the bottom there. But I mean, it feels almost as if the IFP is the silent partner in this whole formation. Because, I mean, when we get to issues, I mean, there were words used like the DA was demanding certain portfolios. I mean, why should then one of the founding members of the GNU be demanding positions and the other one just, writes off on whatever decision is taken amongst the top two? Then it necessarily doesn't mean it's a GNU.
Yeah, so two things there. The process is taxing for the main political actors, the ANC and the DA and the IFP to some extent, and I'll tell you why. For the DA, it's worried about the external gaze of both the constituents as well as the funding community that has got such a vested interest, especially around the economic cluster portfolios. And then it also has, and then Helen and John, among others, have got to manage the internal politics of the party.
Yeah.
Likewise, those acting at the level of the ANC are being watched with a careful eye by their leftist allies, especially, as far as whether this process translates to what they call ukutengisa, or selling out. So it's a huge demanding thing. And then the IFP, on the other hand, is being seen in KZN as having sold out, and among other names they've been called. So that these parties are leveraging the public perceptions to show that we have fought hard, whatever the outcome is going to be, mustn't be taken lightly. It's part of the necessary preparatory work for their constituencies to accept that whatever the outcome is going to come from this will be an outcome which neither of the two major opponents took lying down, but also an outcome that serves the best interest of the country. Now, to your point about demands, two things there. One, the ANC is rightly concerned about a DA that's demanding. Likewise, the DA is rightly concerned about an ANC that's not moving with the times, as far as its psyche of accepting that it's no longer a dominant player. It's a player that's got a majority, but it's no longer dominant. So it cannot approach the process, with a view to having everybody else regard themselves as juniors to the ANC. Yes, indeed, it's still leading the pack, but it's important that the right temperament is maintained across the board.
Very interesting approach there, Doctor. Your level-headedness in terms of how you view this is actually quite encouraging. Now, let's say in the absence, Doctor, of an agreement and the formation or eventual formation of the GNU, what would then be the next best step or process be to be undertaken? We know that the President has already announced the opening of Parliament, which is on the 18th of July. Is that an indication of a timeline, at least, to allay any fears of the what-ifs?
Two things. Either the president is looking at the process and is making some estimate that that time actually works, or in fact, strategically, he wants to create pressure for a decision to be arrived at. Whatever the case may be, it's interesting, it's good. At least for us, it's telling us that there's some commitment to resolving this issue. And then a very interesting question about the aftermath, and it's important. These parties, for some reason, still think that they must do the apartness that we have seen in the last 30 years, where you've got your own space of politicking, I've got mine, we do things regardless of what the other is feeling. That's not the moment, what this moment is for.
Yeah.
That's not why some of us have put our heads on the block to say this GNU can work. The reason why some of us are arguing strongly that this GNU can work is so that we can let go of this principle of separate development in a facade of unity. We actually, I hope that they resist this urge of creating ministries that are controlled by this one party versus ministries that are controlled by other parties. No, That's apartness in an impression of togetherness. My view is that they mustn't fear the counterbalancing effect of having an ANC minister with an opposition deputy minister. We've tried apartness. It didn't help us. It allowed state capture to prevail. Now, with humility and vulnerability, these leaders need to create the context that's necessary for them to collaborate, the context that's necessary to keep each other in check, even in the executive, and know that this government should not be reducible to its constitutive parts. It must be greater than its constitutive parts. And it takes that greatness from when they are intentional about, one, creating power structures that are going to be internally balanced,
Yes.
but also that are going to force collaboration.
All right, Doctor, thank you so much for those level-headed, optimistic views this afternoon. That is, of course, Dr. Ongama Mtimka, who's a political analyst on matters on the GNU.